I'm using this microphone, and you may not hear me so much through the speakers, but it's tied in because we do have some folks who are connected virtually through Zoom, and we're going to have a blended hybrid session where we've got people in the room as well as people connected over the computer. And when Sarah lets me know that we are good in recording, I'll go ahead and get started.
1 second.
Right. This is the new way of doing meetings in the current public health situation we're in. So
all right, we're good to go.
This is the first meeting in what is a hopefully going to become a broader community conversation around the area's recreation, around economy, and around conservation. The conversation is being brought to us this evening by Western Mountains and Rivers Corporation. And we'll give those folks a chance to introduce themselves in a moment. But if you're on the board or involved with Western Mountains and Rivers, would you go ahead and just raise your hand for folks in the room? There's 2, 4, 6 people here in the room. And as I mentioned, this is live in person, and it's also virtual. And I'll try and remember to look at the computer occasionally because those folks are connected with video. And so because it is a blended session, we're going to ask that people just speak one at a time. I'll probably be repeating comments from the audience for the virtual audience, and they can all wave and say hello. And then we'll have people who are speaking, and we'll make sure everybody can communicate as best we can. So the only ground rules really are to be nice, have one person speak at a time. We do want to stay focused on the future, and I think that there is a lot of good things to talk about in that regard, and we'll get into that in a little bit. We do want to identify some common ground and opportunities that we can build on in the region. And as we were talking about with Russell earlier, this is a chance to raise ideas. It's a chance to think about things that we have in common and we can build on. But we're not going to be solving any problems this evening. This is a chance to think a little bit about how we can coordinate and communicate and build some foundations for going forward. So I think what I'd like to do is just kind of go around the room really quickly so if people online know who's with us, and maybe we'll just start over here.
Sure. Russell Walters, President of Northern Outdoors.
Thank you, Russell.
Ben Toll, owner of Maine Lakeside Cabins.
Ben Toll.
Brian Crater, I live in Caratunk.
Brian from Caratunk, thank you for joining us.
Wolf Tone, Director of Maine Huts and Trails.
Wolf from Maine Huts and Trails.
Rachel Crater, third selection here in Caratunk, and Director of Community College Skywatch in Jackson.
Okay, so Rachel from Caratunk and Unity Skywatch.
Holly Toll, Ben's wife, and also owner of Maine Outdoor Sports and Lakeside Cabins.
Yep, thank you, Holly.
I'm Scott Newman. I'm the owner of 201 Power Sports in Bingham, Jackson.
And it was Scott?
Yep.
Yep, thank you. 201 Power Sports.
I'm Susie Hockmeyer, Northern Outdoors.
Thank you, Susie. Nice to meet you.
Joe Christopher, Three Rivers, in by the river.
Yep, Joe Christopher.
Elizabeth Caruso, I live in Caratunk, and we're selecting in Caratunk.
Elizabeth Caruso from Caratunk, thank you.
Rick LaFlame, I'm in charge of land relations for IFW.
And Rick LaFlame from IFW, thank you.
Miranda Kessel with Brookfield Renewable.
Thank you for coming from Brookfield, thank you.
Christian Savage with Somerset Economic Development.
Christian, Somerset Economic Development, thank you. Yep, we got Wolf, yep. Everybody knows Wolf. Thank you.
I'm Larry Warren. I live in New Portland, on the board of Western Mountains and Rivers.
Great, thanks, Larry. And we've got a few people connecting online. Tom Butler.
Hi, everyone.
and
Tom Buck.
Sandy Howard, Caroline Willette, and Brent West. So thanks very much for jumping on, everybody. There is an agenda for tonight's meeting. We really want to provide kind of an introduction to some of the issues that Western Mountains and Rivers has been thinking about for a while, probably a lot of the same things that other people in the area have been thinking about. We do have a couple maps for context in this PowerPoint presentation. The first one is I'll go back to it, is a very kind of large regional view of conservation lands, trails in the area, and here's a more zoomed in version on Caratunk and West Forks. We can refer to those throughout the evening as we go through this, but I don't want to spend a ton of time on PowerPoint. I think that this is a chance to talk with each other and with folks who are joining us about some of these issues. And what I'd like to do is turn it over to Russell, who's going to talk about a few things, just in more introductory kind of remarks, and then turn it over to a couple other folks on the board to dig into more topic type areas, and then we'll all have a chance to talk about those in a little bit. So any questions before Russell grabs the mic? We will be taking questions via chat from folks who are joining us online as well.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. I cannot stop moving, so I have to nail my feet to the floor, I guess. And I did write a few notes just to try and organize my thinking. So apologies if I'm sort of reading some of these. But I think we're here in part because the region has, we all know, I know most everybody here, an incredible variety of natural and built assets that offer unique appeal to the residents and the visitors that will come here. You know, and our location between Greenville and Carrabassett to the east and west, Bingham and Jackman, you know, we truly sit in the crosshairs of an incredible landscape. And yet, I think for years, and Susie's been here longer than most of us, but I mean, for years, there's been a notorious void, kind of a lack of vision and willingness to bring the three towns specifically, the Forks, West Forks, Caratunk together to develop a shared vision for the three communities. Something that people can get behind, that can connect us, and it can connect us to the abutting communities, you know, the communities of Greenville and Carrabassett and Bingham and so on and further north. The plan would have to be bigger than the three towns, but incorporate ideas and input from residences and businesses. It would need input from landowners and state agencies. It would need to meet the needs of the recreation community, private, commercial, human, motorized, summer, winter, sportsman, and conservation. You know, think about all the myriad constituents that are out there. So such a plan would need to be well thought of and is not without, you know, its complexities. A group of people got together to start to imagine a future a few years ago for the region. That's what Western Mountains and Rivers was formed for. Susie, Larry, Pam Christopher, Joe Christopher, Peter Mills of Skowhegan were original members and later joined by Ben and Christian of SCDC. So as part of the plan, we kind of imagined an input process to capture ideas from the communities. Because we don't have all the answers. Everybody needs to kind of lay their shoulder to this a little bit. And while it's important that we invite input and learn from the abutting communities, I think the focus of this initial phase is to focus on an area. One of the questions that I think when Sarah was asking people, you know, what are the questions? What are the things that you're thinking of? One of the area things was define the scope. What is the scope of this initial kind of outreach? And I really think it's kind of, in our mind, it was Caratunk to Parlin, Grand Falls to Indian Pond. That's not to exclude Bingham. That's not to exclude Tom Butler at Sugarloaf or Wolf. But really, if we can get the genesis, the nucleus of that idea, then it allows us the opportunity to find the ways to connect to those abutting important trails and other towns. And we're grateful, Scott and Wolf those of you from outside of town for coming. There's a lot we can learn from the outside towns, and there's a lot we can offer each other. But we have to define that core area and then work our way outwards to realize the potential of these truly connected communities. I'll tackle the elephant in the room. I guess, the purpose of these sessions is not to discuss the merits or the drawbacks of NEC and ECEC. Western Mountains and Rivers is committed to the work of the organization. The work of the organization will continue whatever the outcome of the CMP corridor is, albeit perhaps at different levels, funding, scale. If we've learned anything through this COVID pandemic, we've learned how fragile any of our economies and any of our plans can be. And I think the time is right now to apply the experiences of the past with sound input and planning to imagine a better, more connected and resilient community for all. So that's kind of my preamble, just to set some ground rules, who's involved and what we're trying to achieve. Ben is going to speak a little bit about landowner and trails, and I think Joe's going to speak a little bit about potential marketing and what we need to do. And then it's really an open forum to see what else is out there. Larry says he's good to let us do some stuff. So Ben.
Thank you, Russell. I didn't memorize my speech either, so. Good afternoon. My name is Ben Toll. I'm from Maine Sports and Maine Lakeside Cabins. I wanted to take today and just take a kind of a 30,000-foot overview of some of the challenges we face as an ATV club, a snowmobile ATV dealer, and just general club issues. Just want to start with some quick data points. The ATV clubs do about 26,000 volunteer hours maintaining 6,000 miles of trails. Our snowmobile community has 30,000 miles of trails. I believe that's more trails than actual roads in the whole state. We have 350 ATV and snowmobile clubs combined. We have over 70,000 registered ATVs and over 80,000 registered snowmobiles. The snowmobile registrations ebb and flow year to year, depending on snow conditions. We're lucky to, in this state, we generally have snow. In some other states they don't. They come here, we get to take advantage of that. Specifically speaking about our ATV trail system, the system was designed for 50-inch wide machines. When the side-by-sides were becoming more prevalent, we changed that to 60 inches wide. We've been faced with landowner challenges because now we have 10% of our registrations that are over 64 inches wide. The machines are bigger, they're faster, they're heavier, they create more damage, they need more attention, more resources to maintain our access. That access is on 94% of private landowners. We're a guest on their land. It's not a right, we're a guest. The most important nugget here is that it brings over $1 billion in economic revenue for the state. Last year, the governor did start a ATV task force to try to mitigate and take care of some of the issues that are rising in this rapidly growing sport. I'm hoping that this community, this group, we can work together and work with surrounding communities to think outside the box and create what I think can be a model environment. I am hopeful a group like this will be able to start a discussion, planning, and understanding of all of our motorized and non-motorized needs, wants, and we can work together for unified trail access. Growth in the ATV industry is in machine registrations now rival snowmobiles. It's created strains and challenges for landowners, clubs, and businesses. We have longer guaranteed seasons, and family orientation has become a driver for the sport. Climate change is inevitable, and we need to prepare for not just next year, but 20 years down the road. Across the state, there are very diverse communities with recreational access. Some towns are more open to traffic and have opened roads, additional access points to businesses, and all these things need to be controlled and considered. multi-use trail systems, wider access routes are all part of the equation. For example, when a town rebuilds a road, they're looking at bike lanes, ATV lanes, to try to funnel traffic and keep riders safe. The advent of the side-by-sides has opened up the riding demographic. More families are going, there's four-seaters, six-seaters. Older people are able to get out and explore more. Family vacations are now planned around riding locations and activities. As I said, the machines are bigger, they're more comfortable, you can ride further. Destination riding with multiple loops and trails are critical. So before, the landowners are not incentivized to have riders on the property. And we know it only takes a few bad eggs to ruin it for everybody. We need more funding for enforcement. We need more education. We need more usable resources for the rider and community involvement to maintain trails and maintain access. Access is not guaranteed. Vacations are planned around these services, around these trails. When they close a section of a trail for logging, businesses, vacation, law enforcement, it's all affected. We need permanent easements, our own land access to secure future riding. And as a club, we hear firsthand all the issues, complaints, and needs. An example of today's standards for trails is much different than it was just 5 years ago. More landowner requirements to keep their costs down, maintaining, to keep up with the excess traffic, the size of the machines, the weight of the machines, grading a couple of years, dealing with water mitigation, even those little pesky beavers. And then it's all expensive, and we're all understaffed. Technology has changed the riding community, especially snowmobile season. 10, even 5 years ago, didn't have instant notification on trail conditions, trail reports like we have now. The impact on the community can have massive swings week to week based on rider feedback. Grooming costs are rising, rider expectation costs are rising, and funding is hard to come by. On the ATV side of things, trail conditions cannot be overcome week to week. If we have additional snow or grooming, it doesn't affect ATV trail systems. It takes major planning. It takes a lot of money to go into the system. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with NEST, New England Sled Talk, New England ATV and Side-by-Side Talk, Skidoo owners, etc. But these are all Facebook groups that we own and monitor, and we get instant feedback from the rider community. To keep our area a center point, we all must be cognizant of what is being said and what we are doing to attract, maintain, and support the riding community. So you can see this community actually competes with the entire state. One club in the middle of the system can hurt the economy of other areas. You cut off one trail, when we only have a few major outlets, it kills our opportunities. An example of a major change that I think is needed is base trail work in the forks. It's very expensive, but it's the difference between low snow condition ability to ride and not coming here at all. We witnessed this past year. We have several trails where the base needs about a foot of snow or more to groom. Some communities have invested a lot of money in making the base better, smoother, less rocks, wider, more snow coverage. It helps traffic. We don't have a mountain here. We're just far enough from lakes that we have to rely on our rivers and our trail systems. Clubs need to be better connected. Communities have to have better tools to showcase their recreational plans, interactive websites, applications, from biking, horseback riding, jeeping, etc. We all have the same goals. We all have the same challenges. The smaller groups of non-motorized activities don't have the voice or the reach that can benefit working with like a trail coalition or a group like this. So that said, I do want to push for more, owned land or leased land, and we can't commingle all of our trail systems. We can't. It's just not realistic. What we can do is commingle our sensitive access points, our bridges, our in-town points where we can combine trails and lessen the damage to our systems. We need a program for equipment shared across communities, across resources, across groups. From Solon to Jackman over to Greenbelt, we have a tremendous opportunity to be the trails destination. I hope through this group we can educate, work together, and adapt for changing times.
Yes. And why don't you pass right to Joe, and Joe can talk a little bit about
Microphone.
marketing.
No singing. Glad everybody's here. Glad everybody's online. Marketing is a core interest of mine in the process and has been a part of the Western Mountains and Rivers conversation since we started, something that I always try to chime and contribute on. And this first public meeting for myself and hopefully for this group, and then as word spreads, the broader community and broader online group, is really about creating a grocery list of what's important to people for the direction of the community. That, you know, there are a lot of different pieces of the community, whether it be county government, local governments, that are trying to plan and move ahead. And this is a way to trying to bring some of those together, and at least from this organization and connected organizations, clubs and otherwise, and towns, and is to bring a grocery list of what's important to people so that we're making a plan that is inclusive, that accomplishes a broader series of goals, that markets to a broader group of people to come to the area, and not just to recreate, but to live, to educate their children. These things are what builds communities. And hopefully this is one of many forums, like a town meeting, like the old Raft Maine group, and, you know, that brings a group of ideas together, that puts things on a list, that has multiple communities contributing to try and grow an area. And some people might not want to grow that area, but at least this is a forum by which people contribute and talk about how to get to a place that means something. So for me, that's what's important in the conversation. And as it comes to marketing, our area used to be a little more robust than it was a couple times in history. The logging industry, when it was articulated by people with saws and horses and so on, is a much larger community. And then it dipped for a good long time. And then when rafting came along, the community grew pretty robustly for a good period of time, and that has tailed off. And as that tails off and interests change, and whether it be motorized, snowmobiling, and ATVing are growing industries, and mountain biking is a growing interest. And as those things, as that community changes, how do you articulate that as a community and with the resources that you can pool as a group to get to where you'd like to go? So for me, as a board member of the Western Mountains and Rivers, and then subsequently as it pertains to marketing, a grocery list of what people in the community think is best, and what the direction that can take, and then how different groups can communicate and contribute that to get us there. When I've lived here for about 28 years, and I started as a guide and then as a business owner, but we used to have a large, robust, through the rafting community, and at the time, the Raft Maine Association, we had a robust group that contributed a large amount of marketing dollars and ideas and how that should go. And there was a lot of community conversation through that competitive market. And it was just the rafting industry, but I'd like to see that extend out to the whole community, the surrounding communities, and so that we're working towards similar goals. They don't all align all the time, and they never will, but at least if we have it all on the table and we're trying to accomplish as many goals as possible, and people put those things on that grocery list in these initial meetings, then we can try and include as much of that as possible. When the rafting was robust and the Raft Maine Association was articulating itself through it that way, my company alone, and most of that, I was trying to do some quick math earlier, contributing about 2% of our overall marketing budget into that organization, resulted in a $50,000 to $80,000 a year budget for that organization. And that time it had a director for a long time. She was wonderful, Wendy Gray, did a fantastic job. And what she did was, we were on the list. Our community was on the list of places to go and things to do. And it didn't really take there wasn't a huge amount of money. And it was a small percentage of the money for the companies and entities that were operating in the area to pool together to give that organization at the time, which is a very competitive industry, hard to come together, but it was still through meetings like this one, contributed ideas and took a relatively small amount of money and put this great community with a unique names, Caratunk, the Forks, very marketable, fun sounding thing. What'd you call that place? The Fork, Cara what? You know, very interesting places that are very marketable, and brought ideas and people that were robust and passionate about that together, contributing a relatively small amount of money. And there are many different funding sources Western Mountains and Rivers will pursue and continue to pursue, whether it be through SEDC and the county and state and tourism dollars and any of the projects going on in the area, to start to bring those ideas together and try and get our community going back in a robust direction. Russell had brought up education earlier, and the educational opportunities today, because of online education and so on, which we're learning about with COVID right now and so on, becomes, kind of opens up a whole different world of education possibilities in a very small community with online connectedness and so on. And so getting all those ideas in a grocery list and how people can passionately move our area forward, and it doesn't have to be, you know, a spike that we've seen before, but a consistent plan and a way to conversate about that and move those things forward is what is most important to me. In the marketing of that, I'm not a big Kevin Costner fan, and I don't believe if you build it, they'll come. I think you need to invite them and to come to an already beautiful area that does a lot of interesting things, lakes, rivers, trails, different activities, biking, skiing, snowmobiling, rafting, kayaking, fishing, hunting, all these great things that we have on our list, that something that invites people there, and then the community begins to generate some resources. And a lot of the buildings and businesses and jobs and the things that are here now, because we had that robust period of time, you know, through the 90s, late 80s and into the 90s, and those things were constructed. So I think if we get people coming, invite them to our great area, and that's a marketing exercise, and that's why I'm up here talking about marketing, is because I think we can pull the ideas, get the plans going, whether it be trail plans or marketing plans, or, you know, what people's needs are, and putting those things on the list, and then develop a relatively reasonable budget as incomes grow to bring more people to the area, which continues to move us in the right direction. So for me tonight here, I'm glad people that took the time to show up. It's in the middle of summer and it's pretty nice here by the lake tonight. I'm glad people are participating here and online. And I think it's really about getting a grocery list of important issues and important things that people want on the table, and where can this go, and what they remember it being before, and how we can get to there. And those things that need to be connected, where do we need to connect to, and put things on the grocery list that we can market and that we can bring people to the area and keep things going in the right direction. So that's my point for the evening on it. And hopefully people have a lot of great ideas to contribute to the list. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Joe. Before we get too much further, I did want to make a point. I should have mentioned at the beginning that we are located this evening, and if we could do a 360 with a camera, we would, but I don't want to do that because it's all wired up. Maine Lakeside Cabins here at Caratunk is donated their space this evening for this purpose, and it's a beautiful facility. Thank you very much for that. And I did want to also note, because we are going to be entering a phase of the conversation here, where Sarah Delghizo from North Star, and I'm Ben Smith from North Star Planning. Sarah's going to be very busy kind of coordinating the virtual audience we have with our in-person audience. And for me, when I think of what we just heard from people, it's talking about change and the changes that have occurred. You can go all the way back to the, cutting wood with horses and using horses in the woods. But I think that even looking at it over the last few decades, and thinking about the changes that have happened in people's lifetimes here over the last 20 years here, what are the next 20 years going to look like? And I think that this is really the start of that conversation. And what I'd like to do is kind of shut the screen for a moment, and we're going to go to a just kind of a session where we think a little bit more about a few different aspects of the future. And we're going to be writing down some ideas on the board, and Sarah's going to be writing them down for our virtual attendees as well. But we had sketched out a few different categories, and I think we can, not be so structured in the conversation, but just to give people an idea of the kinds of things we're talking about. What are the assets and what are the strengths of the area today? And keeping the conversation focused on what we have in place today that we can build on going forward. And when we think about that, I want to think about it through the perspective of recreation, through the economy, but also the structural things that are in place, the organizations, the groups that are in place today that we can build on. They may not be doing everything we need them to do 5 or 10 years from now, but what are the assets we have in place that we can build on? And I think what I'd like to do is I'll go over to the board, and Sarah, you can bring up the virtual whiteboard for our audience. I'm going to be writing and speaking into the microphone so the folks who are connected virtually are going to be able to participate and hear what's happening in the room here. And then we're going to take a few questions and suggestions and ideas from people who are connected remotely and get those up on the board as well. So the first thing, again, we had thought about was, let's take 10 minutes and talk about recreation. What are the recreational assets that we have in place in this area today that we can build on for going forward? And just go ahead and shout it out, and I'll repeat it into the microphone for the virtual audience.
The obvious stuff is the rivers, lakes, trails, mountains.
Yep.
The mountains are starting to play a bigger role in big hiking and climbing, the waterfalls. The obvious stuff.
Right, the natural assets of lakes, rivers, trails.
I think, to me, one of the key things that I see WMRC being able to do is connectivity. We have all of what we have here. They've got a great organization to bring on. They're marketing themselves, and they're becoming well known on the map. Rangeley has it. Caratunk has it. We need to be, we're right in the middle of all these great, Bingham is right below us. We need to, we're connected to you. We need to really.
I'll head over.
We need to be able to connect to our neighbors. We're like the hub of the wheel here, and we need to connect to the others, make a focus on ourselves so that we can get the marketing dollars and the, where I'm looking for. Yeah. And the recognition of who we are. And we've sort of been left out because we're not well organized. These other groups all are. And they've raised money themselves over the years. They've gotten foundation money, et cetera, et cetera. And we've never been able to pull ourselves together to really get organized enough to be a player in the game. And we sit right in the middle of all of those areas, and we connect with each other with trails. And I think that is so important.
So just to repeat and maybe summarize, you can tell me if this is a fair summary. You started out talking about connectivity and specifically trail connectivity, but you also referenced some areas like Greenville and Rangeley and places that have organized. Caratunk is another good example. Bingham. Other places that have some kind of organizational capacity to help make these connections and get them on the map.
They're on the map. We're not.
Get on the map.
I think I'm going to elaborate on what you said, but I think you're kind of touching on like a region
regional brand identity.
Yes.
And like the Caratunk region or Lucas, regularly, they all have, and they have some wayfinding and different things. They have for that regional brand and identity.
So like a regional brand and identity related to the trails, common signage.
All of it. I mean, it's all part of it. I mean, the Millinocket area, also another up and coming one. They've got rivers too. They're going to over there. You know, we need to work as a region. We're always in a community. Our competition isn't each other at all. I mean, we need to grow together collaboratively in our area so that we can be branded as an area to come to, so that we can compete with the other areas that are growing. And we're in the best location. We're right in the middle of all of them.
It's almost that we're blessed with so much that we don't know where to focus. You can cherry pick for hiking trails, ATV trails, snowmobile trails, two great rivers, all of those things. So how do we, what's important to the community?
Russell, saying how to focus on the.
How do we prioritize? When you look at someone like Caratunk, they prioritize, they made a plan for their mountain biking community. And that's not easy. That's taken them 10, 15 years.
Intentional.
Yeah, they did it with intention, but they started 10, 15 years ago. We need to do with intention those things that we would like to do. That, maybe rafting hopefully stays where it is, but we could be growing some of those other shoots.
How to maintain rafting and the other good things going on while being thoughtful about growing,
Nurturing some other
prior
opportunities.
nurturing other opportunities.
You want people to stay for multiple days. And they need multiple things to do to stay for multiple days. And we have to develop an organized plan for that.
Are there any chat questions at this point?
No chat questions at this point. I do think if we could share the microphone, if people are okay with that.
Maybe
That would be
that's
good.
better than trying to,
I'll run the microphone.
Russell's gonna be the microphone runner, so you just
Yeah.
raise your hand.
I think my steps.
Yeah.
You wear sneakers, so you can throw something, Russell will run right over. Thank you. Good
We're
idea.
talking about assets of the area and, different things. I think our area is robust and unique, both in its physical and spiritual assets. The people that live here and have been here, or even the people that come here that are new to the area, they're here because they're robust. It's not an easy area. The physical nature of the rivers, the mountains, it's aggressive, it's fun, and it's very robust. And I think that once I always come from kind of that marketing perspective, but it's very unique and it's robust. And I think that whether it's ATVing or rafting or mountain biking, or none of these things that we're talking about on the list are super passive, So I think that as we talk about a community identity and the direction that it takes, there's a lot of pieces that go into that, but that's what sticks out to me. I like to think that's why I get here, and all my friends are that way, and so I think a lot of people seek that. So that would be part of that identity, or I think an asset that we need to capture and be cognizant of in the plan.
Go ahead, Ben, and then maybe other folks who haven't had a chance to speak up yet, we want to hear a little more as well.
When you think about identity for the area, most people I talk to, they think of the Forks area, they just think of rafting. And the old adage of you can't get there from here can sometimes apply here. And that's, I think, one of our common goals is no matter what vehicle we choose for recreation or multi-day stays, it's having growing a spider web out from this center nucleus. We haven't done well at taking advantage of our position, which we always agree. When I mentioned earlier about, we don't have a ski mountain, we're not close to the lakes, but they're all in reach. We have to develop a good plan to get to those places, and for those people to get to here, easier. more activities, more, yeah, we branded. Cut off.
So I think one of the things, so we are specifically for Maine Lakeside Cabins, the resort, you know, our biggest thing is weddings and events. And when we bought this place, you know, 8-9 years ago, we had to find a different focus, meaning we didn't want to compete with rafting, we didn't want to compete with things that other people would do. We had to find a unique niche. And so we decided, all right, well, we have a place where we can do events. We can bring people who have never experienced this area before up here because they are going to attend events. Now, on a non-COVID type time, like we're averaging 150 people coming up here every weekend that have never seen this area. And the biggest sell is what we have to offer. But why, on average, do we, you know, so we do on average 45 events every year, averaging 150 people, but 150 people times 40 to 45 events, the majority of these people have no idea that the Forks area, this area even exists. Who we are, what we do, any of this stuff. So how do we get the word out? How do we brag about who we are and what we do? And that's a big challenge that I think WMRC has really got to put at it. We have people that come up on average 4 days. They want to see it all, they want to do it all, they want a vacation, they want to have fun, they want to attend the event, they want to do all of these things. And we have so much going for us, but what we're really not good about is bragging about what we have to offer. And we just got to get better at it. Let's skip this. Oh, thank you.
Just to keep in mind, Sarah, jump in with any contributions folks have. Thank you.
So to mirror what Ben and Holly said, I think to add to that, accessibility. So there are an incredible array of assets here that we've been here for 10 years, and some of them I still don't know how to get to without asking somebody who's lived here longer. And that's a huge challenge. Like, it's not even that hard to get to, you just have to know what the information is. Right, so where can I put my boat in, and how do I access one, and then where can I go swimming, and how do I hike Pleasant Pond? We have the assets, but we don't have the information available to people to use it. And keeping them a secret makes it a lot harder to tell people what we have and make sure that they can use it. And that's who says first major thing they tackle is signage. You know exactly how to hike all the peaks that you want to do. So that information
Is this maybe a fair way to say, or say how to share the local secrets?
Yeah. And also, you know, trying to let the locals know. Also trying to let the locals know that it's okay that we are building a business, that we are expanding a business, that we're not trying to step on the best kept, you know, the toes of the best kept secrets, that we're trying to expand, we're trying to pay our taxes, we're trying to do all of these things. And the reason why we all still do this, and the majority of the average of the folks that have been in business up here, I mean, it's years upon years and years of experience. We do this because we're passionate about it. And when we stop being passionate about it, I feel like all of us will stop being in business. So realizing from the local perspective, the tourism perspective, that we all have a stake in this game. Oh, yes, please.
Now,
One of the assets that I've been most familiar with is the trail corridor that's operated by and owned by Maine Hudson Trails. Part of the challenge for recreation and conservation in the region is having public access to private lands. And with the rapidly changing face of land ownership, it only takes one lot to break up the continuity of a trail. Maine Hudson Trails is on the verge of completing a 120-mile corridor that will run from the backside of Sugarloaf to Moosehead Lake. And it completes the acquisition of one piece in the Kennebec Forge with warehousing. That resource is in place for the most part in either fee title or in easements in perpetuity. There are a couple of leases along the way, but they're very short areas that are in lease. Maine Hudson Trails has raised a lot of money and built 4, I think, unique and distinctive lodges that run from Caratunk to Grand Falls. This corridor really is going to need additional community support. It has to be more, I think, responsive to the needs of the communities. It has to have a broader involvement and more involvement personally with its staff and its board in working with these communities. And I think that the opportunities that lie from the Forks to Moosehead Lake are hopefully areas where Western Mountains and Rivers Corporation can focus in the future. But the low-hanging fruit right now is to improve the corridors that exist from the Forks to Sugarloaf, and to tie the Forks and Sugarloaf together with joint year-round marketing. 50,000 people that go down the dead and Big Rivers in a normal non-COVID year. Paradise Valley, a good year on the golf course would probably be 15,000 golfers. I don't know what the numbers are in terms of the zip line, but the growth in Paradise Valley, obviously over the last several years, has been in mountain biking. Western Mountains and Rivers Corporation has proposed a memorandum of understanding to Maine Hudson Trails to collaborate and to cooperate on working together to manage and maintain and hopefully harden the trail from the Forks to Sugarloaf, to make it e-mountain bike so that it can be accessible and available to all members of the community, whether they have out an e-bike or make more accessible. That means within charging stations at Flagstaff, and then promoting the use more aggressively with marketing dollars. And hopefully we can reach out to Sugarloaf, to the town of Caratunk Valley, to Somerset County, and the lands in between, to work more collaboratively with Caratunk, the Forks, the West Forks, and to begin planning for the future of the Rockford and the region. But that 120-mile corridor is substantially in place. It's a huge asset. Be aware of it, should embrace, help plan its contribution to these communities as well as for what its future may
And then go ahead, Christian, and then we'll go.
Yeah,
Larry touched on it, with warehouse. I think one asset we have is accessibility on their lands. That's not typical nationwide warehouses. So, we have a close-knit relationship with them and continue to do so. I think the long-term planning, as Ben mentioned, we also have to look at, are we rerouting some of these trails, just have consistent access to small section or large section, the volatility of this is challenging for a lot of these businesses. And then visitors who plan the year round come here and their route changes really quick. So, but I think that the passion locals have for the natural resources that we have, I think, the knowledge of, hey, Susie is, walks a super buggy with her Saturday afternoon, you should probably know the answer to that, and I think gaining that historical and institutional knowledge in a group setting like this definitely be beneficial. But I think having this group discuss, the larger activity board for a long weekend will be big because, you can ask Jones how many times weekend guests rafts, everyone's probably assuming it's once and they're doing other things the rest of the weekend. But there's stuff for them to do, and it's a lot different. But as Larry mentioned, the trail accessibility, the Maine Huts is huge. It's going to connect different parts of the region. And I know everybody's kind of focused on a smaller geographic area tonight, but it will naturally blossom into a larger area for sure.
I'm Wolf, right on the screen. I'm going to tap on my left shoulder and say, that shoulder, I'm from away. And 16, 17 years ago, I moved down there. And I used to do this work that we're here doing tonight in New England and help lead it in Maine, and I've done it in Bethel, and I've done it in participants in Greenville and Portland, and it works. The process can work. And it's something you have to trust. And you have to sort of get ready to put your ideas on the table. And you always have to kind of think about, when this is over, I want to make darn sure I'm walking out with a product that I can feel like there are outcomes that we can chase, and that this isn't something that just sits on the desk. So it really can work, and I think this is going to be an incredible process. I was introduced to this area through the Full Stream Conservation Project. That's the first time I ever came up here. And the next couple of trips was over on Tall Mountain Rock. And I started, like you said, you're this hub, you're this connectivity, and I think now going over my other shoulder, I'm now the director at Maine Huts and Trails because of that love for the landscape and everything that it offers in the broad sense. And I think that I'm now almost there 2 years in my role and have held wanting to participate more on this side of the system is a real priority. And as you may gather, we have a little bit of a capacity challenge, but that's not a lack of a sincere interest and willingness and commitment for the organization to be more present here. And I think this process is an incredible opportunity for Maine Huts and Trails to listen to what you have and look at the maps of what you have and listen to what you want and what your goals and your priorities are. And I think we were, as an organization, already sort of opening to other opportunities. COVID breaks it wide open. We absolutely have to find another way to pursue our work. And we are. At Flagstaff on Wednesday night, we announced that we were going to rent Flagstaff Hut, and by like Friday midday, it was almost reserved full. The only spots open are September, and that's probably because of school and not knowing what's going to happen at school. So we're renting to families. That was a new idea. We don't know what the answers are totally, but we're willing to pivot, we're willing to learn. And to Larry's point, I think we have something to offer here, but we've got to listen and learn what it is we want to have. Try to accomplish. I just wanted to make sure I had a chance to cheer and applaud some of the language I've heard already, because it's really spot on, but then also talk about future opportunities.
Thank you. No, no motion, please. Discussed with some people in the room before, and I don't know if we're just talking assets or challenges, but a piece of the plan and on the grocery list needs to be transportation, public or otherwise, public, private, contract, or otherwise transportation. Some of our research has shown in my businesses, the people accessing here from the city, a lot of folks in Boston and otherwise, and maybe there's a COVID change there as people move away from larger profit centers, which population's been urbanizing for some time now, but people don't own a car because everything they need is in their neighborhood, so just popping in and driving off to the Forks or northern Maine became more of a challenge, and it just took a certain percentage of the population segment that might do these activities or come to these places out. So I think transportation in general, whether it be from Augusta, Waterville, or Portland, or even Boston, or even the UK, further away, part of our planning and things that need to go on the list, and that we've been working on even inside of my own entities, is transportation to the area and in and about the resources that we have. Even while you're here, if you have someone staying in your facility, they came by public transit, how do they get to Moxie Falls or Pleasant Lawn Mountain or Moosehead Lake? So transportation needs to be in the list as part of what we're creating and trying to accomplish.
And why don't we go to Sarah here, who can represent a personal comment.
Can everyone hear me okay with this thing on? Yeah, okay. So Brent West says, when looking at connectivity to the west, the major assets are the new AGV connection through Lexington to Bingham and the snowmobile connection to Eustis to Lower Enchanted. There needs to be more, but the Kennebec is an obstacle. Other assets include the AT goes through Caratunk. Other regions have taken advantage of that, like Monson and Rangeley.
Nice.
Yeah. Excellent. I'm just gonna follow up on something that Joe said. I think things are gonna change. There's one thing about COVID, it's disrupted lives, and we're all hanging on by our fingernails, you know that. But I think if we can all survive it, we're gonna come out better on the other side, because I think the one thing that people listening to people on the phone, our phones are ringing off the hook. They want to come out here. They're all of a sudden that shift of everybody want to go urban, their kids they just want to stay on their phones. They want to get out of the cities, they want to get back to nature. They're clamoring for it. So I think this is a great opportunity for us at this time to plan, be ready.
Where are there comments in the back? Anything?
Oh, no, I was saying I see all the license plates. I guess I do have a question. I do live here as locally live in Bingham, and also in my role at Brookfield, when it comes to recreation, management, and the natural resources, sometimes there can be conflict between what the local interests or what the interests are of the local residents versus what the sort of the second homeowners or recreation visitors have. So I guess my question would be, how would you guys plan to sort of engage people locally or get local representation or buy-in sort of outside of the benefits of the visitors? Just because I know we deal with something like I deal with.
Yeah. I'm actually seeing it right now, sure.
Yeah, I think
Public comment, public meetings, I try and get that
Yeah.
on the list.
Yeah, I think for us, what we try to do is reach out to the selectmen, the local officials, and we'll invite it and say, how do you want to see this represented in your constituents, your townspeople? Because if there's anything going on, I do a lot of work in tourism outside of Norwood. And if there's anything going on in tourism now, or at least 6 months ago, think about Barcelona, think about all of the over-tourism places in the world. How do we build tourism for the locals? And that's changed a little bit right now, but it's the same thing as that. So how do you build a tourism economy with local people, local residents in mind? Now, oftentimes there's benefits, right? The benefits are just like you see over Sugarloaf on Caratunk sit, we get the access to the trails. When the tourists aren't there, we get to play. So there's what is it the locals want? That they can have, that is paid for, that is developed with other people's monies, other people's interests. And so we've got how do we involve? We just got to keep going through this process, and what can continue to invite people. I think I heard a comment from somebody about this process. It's got to be transparent. It's as transparent as we can make it, through Zoom and other things. So make a transparent process that people can follow, and invite them into the thing, if you will. But I think it's really important that we all the way around involve local residents and remember the landowners. All too often, what we are doing, we're using other people's lands, and tourism in this state has been criticized many times for not having done a part. I think that's another piece of the puzzle that we've got to try and figure out.
Just a reminder, when you have the mic, Joe, you don't need this reminder, but just speak up a little bit louder so that they can hear it. It's a little quiet.
He's being very quiet.
The other thing with the local communities I think is important is channeling use to where it's appropriate. So if we need to get those opinions in. Pleasant Pond Mountain is an asset that people gravitate to. So getting people there, parking them appropriately, having them stay on that trail system, and then having them not go into residential areas that are unintended. At Sugarloaf, I live in a residential area that sees no overflow from transient public because it's a residential area that's developed that way. So I think that getting the things on the list that are important to the communities, realizing that you're going to use some core assets and that those things are important in some lands, but then having the important we don't want to use, or these are the unintended consequences that can happen that we don't want to happen, and having those things on that list, that's part of that development process too. Assets is one thing, but barriers, problems, even like I brought up transportation, those problems or those concerns, they're as important in the list as anything else, so that they're in your plan.
Thank you. And Sarah, you can keep an eye on if there's additional comments. I think that you did raise a good point, and from the standpoint of competing interests, and sometimes some interests might, on the face of things, be conflicting interests. And there are going to be a lot of conversation, and I understand that there have been a lot of conversations around competing interests. And I think that by getting those things out on the table and talking a bit about what those interests are, and I think part of this process is finding out where the overlap is. There is common ground in a lot of these scenarios, and I think just talking about it and getting those things out there. I know that the point about if you build a boat launch, people from downstate, people from out of state are going to trailer boats there, but that's also a boat launch that people can have access to if they live a mile down the road. So I think there are going to be a lot of important partners, and we have been talking a lot about physical assets, natural assets, and before we leave this evening, I'd be interested in talking a little bit more. I think Christian had hit on it a little bit, of networks of people. There are people who know things, people who know people who could tell you the history of local events going way back. I know there are representatives from local government here, I know there's representatives from county government here. Are there other organizations or groups of people, ATV clubs, another example, that really bring a lot to the table, who could be more engaged, or maybe organizations that could be doing more? I think a good example of that might be what Joe was saying earlier about an organization that did a lot of marketing, but maybe capacity's changed, focus has changed. It's still a need, but it's going unmet based on that organizational issue. So I think as we think about assets, it's not just all the great trails and the river and the world-class activities that are available up here. It's how do you harness the power, the people power, the capacity to make some of that happen. If you have some of those ideas, those would be great things to build on tonight as well.
Well, two that I can think of are historical, and little Benedict came through. I mean, I'm always fascinated by that history. I don't know if it's too far south, but I think, you know, just to any age, thinking about what they accomplished and that they came trouncing through this landscape is something to promote. The other thing I think about is your corridor coming out from Canada and the engagement of the French Canadians, and you know, some of the things they've done over in range that you're trying to make sure you're getting language out there, make it sort of more you want them to slow down and stop and see, you know, what do you do to help make that happen. So those are two, just history and culture. Yeah.
To spin off of what Wolf said, I think bringing organizations and their goals, in most organizations in the area, even a club, snowmobile club, ATV club, bike club, any of those things, they have a mission statement and they have goals. And that's even the Chamber of Commerce system, been working in this community for a very long time and covered a lot of different of these little pieces. So I think finding the goals of other organizations, even if they're not activities-based goals, it could be anything really. We don't have a lot of faith-based stuff that I'm aware of in the area, but you know, the Scenic Byway or any organizations taking their mission statements, adding them to as a piece of information for lists and goals and concerns and other things that go into it, making a list of the other organizations in the area and finding out what their missions are, what their concerns are, what their list of goals are, could be super helpful to this process.
All right. Another comment from Brent West. So Brent had a recent conversation with Christina Cannon at Main Street, Skowhegan. She mentioned that people will only travel to areas where they have a variety of things to do, and she sees the assets as assets of the Forks and Caratunk as part of how to bring more people to Skowhegan. He mentions we should consider including her in the next meeting. Skowhegan is a gateway to the entire Kennebec River Valley, and he represents the High Peaks Alliance, which is a partner to the west.
Very good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. You know, talking about resources, connectivity, obviously broadband connectivity is a major stumbling block in this area, whether it's cell access, fiber access, broadband, it's much needed. And you know, with COVID, we're seeing people working from home, they're doing schooling from home, they need to have broadband. Your guests have now an expectation of instant on and having the world at their fingertips. And I think that a lot of areas up here do suffer because we do not have the connectivity to supply that need. So even like we're doing virtual weddings and streaming, or even this meeting, you know, we have a circuit set aside just for this, and it's axed out until the from the nibs up those streets. But, you know, getting more involvement from broadband providers to the rest of the area, the towns to push those investments, and these projects can help us obtain that is critical for us.
We've clearly got to do a better job or continue to push the vote in terms of that town selectmen. We've got good representation here in Caratunk. Thank you. But we're missing key constituents from the Forks and West Forks. So we have to find ways to continue that dialogue and let them know that they're critical to this dialogue.
Sounds like the same challenges you guys are having up here. It's the same thing I've dealt with in Bingham for years. You know, the local residents have no interest in change. They don't want to see the development. It's losing the secret spots. It's losing, you know, I see this at Pleasant Ridge boat launch all the time. It's a beautiful boat launch. They finally, you know, built the ramp up. It's much easier to get in and out. Parking is what the parking is. That didn't change, but now we're seeing 3 times the traffic on Wyman Lake, and there's no parking, you know what I mean? So now you're hearing residents complain about that, that they can't get their boat in and out, they can't park. There's more people swimming at the dock than there ever was before versus the designated swimming area. Some of that's due to signage, some of it's due to how it's set up. We also see a lot in terms of, you know, events that will miss too with landowners in regards to ATV trails, dust control, things of that nature. You know, I've been battling that all week in Lexington. And the railroad bed. So the railroad bed is a multi-use trail system. So, I mean, one thing I would suggest for you folks up here with, you know, biking systems, hiking systems, certainly keep them separated, because the challenge we have there is we have residents walking their dogs, they're taking their kids for a walk. The river's a beautiful piece. We all want everybody to use, but the problem is because it is a trail system and we can't mandate speed, I think we have a lot of issues with dust, speed, safety, and those kind of things.
Good points.
So we've talked about recreational assets, we've talked about people, structural, kind of organizational things that we can build on. Are there, and maybe people are kind of thinking these things interchangeably, but are there other assets from an economic standpoint that would be things that we could be building on? And I'm thinking of this in terms of, again, private ownership and public use. Brookfield has a lot of assets that are very, very valuable to the public as well. Weyerhaeuser has a lot of public lands that are essential to the types of things that we're talking about, not only growing, but just continuing. Are there things related to these types of use? And I'm kind of asking a question that's a little bit off the script because I think we've had a good discussion, but are there those types of assets that people could be thinking about, broadening the reach? The next meeting, maybe there's another round of phone calls or people knocking on doors to make sure that people are aware that there is public value in things. And then maybe another separate conversation. I think people have brought up good real life examples of places that they know that this area could emulate. Rangeley, Greenville, other kinds of places. It might be interesting to think about for the next step in the conversation, to talk with people in those areas to find out, how they got started and what kind of initiatives would make sense to bring into this conversation as well.
inherently you have, and I've noticed better over the last few years, the Chamber of Commerce is in their use of trail maps and so on, because people advertise, they want to advertise to people staying in Forks to go to Greenville and vice versa, and so there's been some connectivity coming that didn't seem inherent and natural to people before, through those maps, and people cooperating a little more than they might have previously through those maps, because, you know, realizing that someone here could make a choice one day to go one direction and a different direction the next day and the next. And I think expanding that collaboration, the idea of that, finding out what is making that work, there's obviously a commercial component that's driven there, but a desire to collaborate rather than compete that's being created. I think finding the root of that might be helpful. And then including or trying to create a collaboration, I think it's great for this group to try and do. You have groups like the Chamber of Commerce, but then Kennebec Valley Tourism Council. You know, you got to start to bring the goals of multiple groups together and find out where the synergies are. They don't have, they're not always going to have the same goals, but finding where they overlap and looking at funding in a creative way to do that, to create a collaboration. People purchase the ads in those maps, and they're willing to do so. It's just contributing money to each one of those organizations that's creating a spider web. So being able to emulate that on the web or emulate that through those other organizations, I think would be a useful tool in trying to get it done.
And I think we all talked about trails, and anybody snowmobile trail land or ATV land knows that the more trails you build, the more the maintenance costs. And that becomes a diminishing kind of idea. So I think we have to be pretty careful about that. And I also think there's opportunity in Kingdom Trails. How do we, trails are an asset until they cost you so much money that they're not. Kingdom Trails managed to figure out a funding mechanism for their bike trails. How do we experiment? And I don't know if we can do it ATV land. I think there's other ways to do that, but how do we experiment with potential funding sources, fee structures, to look at funding some of these opportunities?
And Kingdom Trails is Vermont.
Correct.
So a lot of that is also private property, correct?
Yes.
So that might be a good kind of.
When it comes to funding on recreational trails and snowmobile trails, ATV trails, most of the funding comes from registration fees, and some from gas tax dollars. And one of the challenges that we face as an industry is that there's a reluctance to raise the fees. It's been pushback from the riding community themselves, because they don't really understand what is really involved, what the costs really are to maintain trails. And what goes into it, where your registration money goes. Where does a tax breakdown go on the gas tax? Where does that money go? So it's educating and then using the resource that's already there, which is a registration base, increasing that, but making sure we understand where that goes and have proof that it goes directly into the trails and the base. And to your point about, you're right, the more trails you have, the more maintenance it costs. And then the worst thing you want to do is have a trail system and have to pull trails back. But if you lose a trail, it's gone. So you have to have a good long-term, short-term, long-term plan to be able to maintain those trails. Part of that, I think, the funding is the towns becoming more involved, and we do get donations from the Forks, the West Forks, for grant, we grant money and things like that. But it's going to take a lot more. And once we get that baseline done, and you have multiple loops and multiple bypass routes, you don't get choked down on a trail section. It could be a win-win. Especially if you can mix up a multi-use trail, like Scott was saying, you can't commingle a lot of trails. We will access those one. But you can almost make a system where you can, 1 year it's this way, next year it's this way, and then
the other traffic switches up, so we get to try this trail for a year. And then the maintenance is on and off years. But, yeah, very good. It's a challenge. Sure.
Well, I know, Peter, I don't think Peter Mills is up on this line, but he's a board member, Western Mass.
We'll see the recording.
Good, because we were in a meeting with him, and obviously he's the executive director of the highway. Turnpike. And we were in a meeting with him, I'm like, man, can't you just take that technology and switch it to trails? Every time you go, you get a little, send a little transports. And I don't know that he bid on the idea, but if we keep bugging him, maybe we can keep fostering that idea as a way to pay to play. Not everyone will like it, clearly, but it's, there's got to be other mechanisms that people could use that we could explore.
Just to tack on to an earlier point, Ed Jarvis mentioned that Kingdom is virtually all on private land. So.
Right.
From a funding standpoint, I think it absolutely will end up having to be multiple and all instruments that can possibly be brought to. So often we look to grant or tax or fee or there's so many absolutely, in my mind, have to be go out and look for all possible financial implements, even if it's a tax break where you don't get money in, but you've saved on something because the money you make is the money you save type of thinking. So I think for this organization and in this community plan, even for the finishing and completing of a plan that can then put rubber to the road, there'll be a need for people to contribute ideas and come up with a combination of all funding implements, even commercially. Generally, that's how things would happen, or we accomplish things is by finding all the different little funding instruments that can be combined to accomplish a goal. I think that this will eventually towns, counties, communities, users, groups, memberships, all these types of things will have to be compliant. I think combining those things will have to be a necessity to make it actually happen. And often, whether if we're on an ATV, or a snowmobile, we kind of key in on just that user group to fund that entire operation. Whereas if this is on an entire plan that is put together for a community, and then all funding are trying to accomplish the many different goals that are in that plan, using a lot of different implements, we might be more successful in looking at it that way.
During our conversations with Peter Mills, it became obvious to him and to the Maine Department of Transportation that electric vehicles are on their way in. And that given the change that's anticipated in the next 20 years, the revenues that could be available from the gas tax are quickly diminishing. The state and federal funding, our bridge support, and for highway support is evaporating. And it's projected to escalate and to continue to become less and less a source for our national highways. So the electric vehicles, I'm sure that we're going to see not just automobiles, but ATVs and snowmobiles, all of the power equipment continue to move into the electric vein. And so it's going to change, it's going to require a change in terms of the revenue sources that make these essential infrastructures sustainable. And so that's one of our 20-year challenges. We have to be aware of it, we have to stay on top of it, we have to find partnerships that basically can tie us in the revenue sources and to be innovative in how you measure them.
Thanks, Russell. This is well, just listening to the conversation, when I kind of carried three things around in other similar dialogues, and it's sort of like the three C's that you're communicating and you're cooperating and you're collaborating. Joe, you brought up collaborate. And in this conversation, then I heard a fourth. I never really kind of thought about it this way. The fourth one that I heard tonight, the other C, was compete. And I was kind of thinking about that and saying that maybe you got to be careful not to want to jump all the way from compete to collaborate to be successful. Like, that's the only way we're going to be successful is if we all collaborate. But you can actually kind of get there in different ways and say, well, maybe an easy step is to just communicate differently. If that trust isn't there, or that friction point is there, or something historically is there, maybe just that part of communicating can get things going and move you towards that successful point. And then the next one is, like, well, we'll communicate. There's not a lot at stake, right? Talking's pretty easy and you're exchanging information. As you move to cooperate, got a little more in the game there. You know, there's a little bit more back and forth, and there's a little bit more investment of yourselves. Collaboration is deep. Money's getting spent, reputation is on the line, and there's time and money and the whole thing. So you don't have to do it all at once. You get to flow through those three. But I just found it really interesting to hear tonight that compete comes up. And I just never thought about that before. And to get there and start moving through those different stages to get to that point of you know, that nested funding and the storytelling and the marketing and get here. I think incredible opportunity.
I wanted to jump in here. This is a very good conversation. It's just about 8 o'clock, and this is the time we had asked for from people. I think that it's fair to let people know. I think this is a good segue from the conversations I heard on this side of the room about next steps. And I think that the idea tonight was that we start to think about some of these opportunities and assets. And throughout the course of the evening, we started to hear about challenges. And we also heard about some things that needed to be overcome and need to be thought about together. So I do want to just take a moment to say the next step in this process is a workshop next week. So on Tuesday, we're envisioning an open house workshop where we'll be set up in this very space from 3 o'clock to about 8 o'clock in the evening. And we're going to have some tables and information set up. And I think the idea would be if people have 10 minutes to pop in, take a look at some information, have a quick conversation, and just get engaged, learn a little more, that's great. If people want to come and stay for an hour, hour and a half, and get a little deeper into this, that's fantastic as well. There are going to be a couple periods during that time between 3 o'clock and 8 o'clock where we want to have a bit more of a looking forward kind of conversation where, you know, we're not just identifying the things we can build on, but how do we start to actually do the building? How do we actually move things forward? So I think that that's going to be an important next step that comes out of this, which is kind of the next step in the conversation. Was there another point to make from the online folks?
There was something, but we don't need to hop back if you're.
Well, I wanted to take this point because in case people do need to leave or break off, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit and kind of continue this if there's additional thoughts and comments to document. But I think in fairness to the folks who have, you know, put in the time that they signed up for, just to give people kind of a guilt-free chance that they can step away. Thank you very much for coming. But I'm happy to kind of keep things going. This has been a very interesting conversation.
And I guess for that next meeting, if there's other people that, you know, weren't here, that we didn't invite, that didn't get the message, if you can pass out to them, you know, to come on and share their ideas and listen to what we're trying to achieve. That's a great opportunity to try and build out that network. So, you know, this is kind of the nucleus of that, but trying to bring it a little bit bigger as well.
So I think with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for our live virtual audience. And to the folks who are going to be viewing this recording in the future, we can pause the recording, and there will be more information coming out over the next few days and some agendas for next week's work, as well as some specific times for when we want to have a little bit deeper of a conversation about that looking ahead kind of aspect of the work.
Are we going to share that recording when
This recording is going to be available. We do want to follow up with everyone we've reached out to so far and make that recording available so people can go back. I know it's been an interesting logistical challenge, but I think that this has been hopefully an interesting conversation. We'll have a good kind of record of the conversation. Any final thoughts from the board?
I'd like to say thank you for everyone. I'd like to say thank you for everyone that gave a couple hours of their evening tonight, and appreciate some of you travel a little distance, some of you just from back home, but appreciate everybody coming in. I think it's super, yeah, super important, and again, thank you to Ben and Holly. And,
Really long crowd.
yeah, really, but making this available, the setup of all the technology, so thank you. And we'll be around for a few more minutes. Susie's doing her meetings over on the fine.
I'll be over at the bar.
I was set back. You'll get your lunch. That competitive model you mentioned, well, interesting about what the Rock Association was maps, so I find.
And I'm gonna shut it down.